They do respond to complaints. They've never not gotten back to me or addressed the situation. I don't think as an elected official I want to get involved in certain aspects of policing. I know nothing about that. So I think from my point of view and my position here, I think that it's handled very well the way that things are going. Inspector?
Yeah, I think it's, like I say, I have a bit of comments and things that we'll get to in the agenda,
Okay.
but I think it's changing the mind frame of community safety solely being a police issue.
Yes.
Because my comments are specifically in relation to some discussions at council that I want to address that's in the agenda, but really getting away of the idea that public safety is solely the accountability of the police. And I do have some statistics and things that we'll talk about, but really changing that mind frame when we talk about public safety, the first thing that comes to mind isn't the police service, is how are we as a community looking after our people and providing them the supports that they need. And I guess that's my plight to all of you, is to start thinking in more of an umbrella way when it comes to that public safety aspect, because we will not have an impact on those calls for service that are growing and will continue to grow in the community.
Thank you. David?
Mr. Chair, we have community policing committees that are very active and do a lot in this community. I wonder if we should defer this to their chairs meeting with one or two of us present. The OPP are always there. This would be a great discussion with us and the chairs, and I think a lot of ideas would come out for that.
That's something we can consider, and certainly we can, if that was to take place, I would suggest a resolution to do so would be in order. I think that's, so I'll turn it back to you if you wish to do it at this time.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a resolution to, that we defer this to our community policing chairs meeting. I think they meet 2 or 3 times a year. We could call one sooner if this is of urgency, with 2 or 3 of the board members attending, and discuss this, and let's see where it goes from there.
You've made that a motion. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Oliver has seconded. You have all that, Maureen? Do you wish to read that out loud, please? And then I'll ask for any discussion.
Moved by Member Murphy, seconded by Member Oliver, that the email from, or should I say that defer the resolution?
I'm not the best at this. This discussion should be turned over to the Community Policing Chairs Committee for further discussion.
I think you want the draft resolution, if I may, sent to them for discussion should they wish to discuss this, okay? I think that the draft resolution is what should be sent, personally. Is that okay?
That's, yeah, no, that's, thank you.
Jim?
Also like to see the memorandum, the previous 2 pages from Andy Grizel to Chair Hellier and the members of this board as part of the agenda item, if you like, for their meeting, because I think it would help put in context why it is we've asked them to have some discussion about it. We're not necessarily asking them to provide direction, but I, for one, would like to hear their input, hear their ideas, especially in light of what the inspector has said this morning about, and I agree with you completely, Lisa, I do, as you've explained it. The community as a whole has a role to play, and the available vehicle we have is our community policing chairs group. So that's why I think this is a good idea to keep the discussion going.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, just before we move on, what I can do that might be of assistance, I can reach out to our community safety program unit in Aurelia and to the other detachment commanders in West Region to see if It would be greatly surprising to me if other communities do not already have a community safety plan, and then perhaps we can use them as a resource that's been out there. So I'll do some
Okay,
some
thank you.
digging on my end to see what I can find.
Sounds great. I am on page 20. Our next item is, this is from a news article of February the 1st. Any discussion on this correspondence? This was concerning a crime up in Simcoe. Any comments on this?
Mr. Chair, I do have a response to it. I've been briefed on it, and I've watched the
We'd be just
video of the
delighted to
meeting.
hear your response, Inspector. Go ahead. Just delighted.
Okay. There are a number of issues that were brought up by council in this meeting and in relation to this news article. Overall lack of police presence in communities, startling crime stats in Simcoe, questions about efforts made by police to curb significant numbers in Simcoe, lack of foot patrol in communities, and lack of visibility of our street crime unit. I would like to take some time, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, to address all of these issues today, as I believe this topic spurs a much larger conversation for us. Each councillor has a voice for their individual community or communities within Norfolk County. And I think it's very safe to say that every community wants to have high police presence and visibility. This is the issue we deal with, whether it's on town council or in policing, competing priorities with fixed budgets and fixed resources. As the OPP Detachment Commander for Norfolk County, it's my job to look at the county as a whole and direct resources to where they have the biggest impact on public safety and the core policing services as legislated in the Police Services Act, such as crime prevention, law enforcement, and assistance to victims of crime. I've come today prepared to speak about all the issues raised by council, which I believe gives me an opportunity to truly highlight all of the efforts, both reactive and proactive, being done by your police service to enhance public safety and promote community involvement. My intention today is to clarify and qualify some crime statistics that have been highlighted recently, address concerns raised by council, and perhaps create a positive conversation that involves both police and the community in mutual ownership for public safety. I'd like to start with the topic of mutual ownership and accountability. In 2010, the OACP adopted the Community Mobilization and Engagement Model for community policing. The model was developed to both assist police with deployment of resources to have the biggest impact on public safety, and the model is also used as a tool to explain to communities how the delivery of police services works and why we do what we do. The model focuses on community engagement, public education, and crime prevention as the cornerstones or pillars of keeping our communities safe. This model is a continuum of involvement from all three of these pillars and is a basis for how the community fits in as a partner in the public safety effort. I'm actually quite happy to speak about the efforts of our officers and the efforts they continue to make in Norfolk County, but we cannot be in all communities at all times, and we know we cannot do it alone. Having police as the only accountable body for public safety in your community will greatly hamper your success and build unrealistic expectations for your police service. Police are now requested to attend more calls for service that involve social disorder causes rather than law enforcement issues. Even though there may be a law that's been broken, the root cause for the incident is a social issue. Mental health, addiction, disturbances, drugs, youth complaints, etc. In these cases, if we stop at law enforcement, we know it will be a never-ending cycle. We will continue to return to the same call for service until it escalates to a police action. This is why we need help from the community support services, family members, neighbors, community leaders to ensure we identify those in need of services and get them the support they need before the situation becomes repetitive and escalates. I want to share some statistics to demonstrate the issue within Norfolk County. In Norfolk County, over the past 5 years, there's been a 31% reduction in violent crime, a 37% reduction in the last 7 years. There's been a 22% reduction in all property crime over the last 5 years and a 33% reduction in the last 7 years. We've seen a 30% reduction in assaults, 26% reduction in break and enters, 33% reduction in mischief, and a 46% reduction in mischief just over the last 7 years. Crime stats and trends seem to be down overall, with the following exceptions. In the last 5 years in Norfolk County, we've seen a 71% increase in mental health calls for service. In the last 7 years, that number grows to a 121% increase. In the last 5 years, we've seen a 24% increase in domestic violence. There was a spike in 2012, and if you go back 7 years, there's been absolutely no change in those numbers. EMS, I don't want to speak for their numbers, but we have had conversations with them, have had a very significant increase in their calls for service for drug and alcohol overdoses in our community. Not to mention the 2 naloxone deployments we've had in the last couple of months. Police are very good at what they do, and what they do is crime prevention through enforcement. We can make significant impacts on criminal activity, which I believe our officers have demonstrated over the last 5 to 7 years of statistics, but we will not have an impact on social disorder issues. We can see that in our trends for the county that I just spoke about. Crime rates are down greatly over the past 5 to 7 years. However, calls for service in relation to social disorder, mental health, domestic violence, and addiction have either remained unchanged or in the circumstances of mental health and addiction have increased significantly and substantially. This is where the model is key and mutual accountability is imperative. Any community that relies solely on police enforcement for public safety in communities and safe communities will not succeed sheerly due to the volume of calls for service that involves social issues. Community safety planning is a bigger picture than just law enforcement. We as your police service need community leaders to see they have a role to play with us in partnership for public safety in Norfolk County. I would like to take the opportunity now to address the issues and concerns raised by council in relation to statistics, police presence, and engagements. I believe their concerns speak to their desire to be engaged in community safety conversations, and in the end, that's what we're all passionate about. In relation to Simcoe crime stats, I believe it's fair to say, even though I am new here, that I said in the last couple of months, Simcoe is a hub for Norfolk County. It's where people shop, eat, and play in the county. Alone, it represents almost a quarter of your county's population. It's a county resource for support services, has an escalated seasonal population, and is a pit stop for visitors to the county. For all of these reasons, the calls for service volumes in Simcoe are neither startling nor alarming to me. Calls for service and crimes are going to be escalated in higher population areas, especially in areas such as yours in the county that have a central hub. Simcoe represents 22% of Norfolk's population and represents 29% of our calls for service. If I look at the trends in Simcoe over the last 5 to 7 years, in relation to the efforts of our officers and support services within your community, violent crime is down 25% in the last 5 years, 35% in the last 7 years in Simcoe. Assault calls for service are down 11%, 27% in the last 7 years. Break and enters are down 39%, illicit drugs calls for service down 50%, mischief's down 32%, which raises to 42% in the last 7 years. However, we see the same trend in Simcoe as we do in Norfolk. Mental health calls have increased by 28% in the last 5 years and 62% in the last 7. Domestic violence has increased by 41% in the last 5 years and again has remained unchanged over the last 7. And again, we see the EMS rates for drug and alcohol overdoses increasing. When we look at crime trends to identify concerning spikes, we do not solely look at crime volume, which was what council was concerned about in the last meeting. If we did, a theft from a vehicle would carry as much weight as a homicide when it comes to crime. We look at what percentages of crime is present in each community as compared to their calls for service. For example, if I look at violent crime in Simcoe represents 5.4% of the total calls for service in Simcoe. If I look for violent crime in Delhi, it represents a higher 5.9% of their calls for service. There's different things that we look at other than volume to determine where public safety needs are. We look at crime severity indexes where volume and severity are taken into account. This allows us to compare communities equally while taking severity and population into consideration. This allows us to compare our county crime rates not only to other communities, but to the province of Ontario and to Canada itself. If these rates fall above the rates for provincial and federal levels, these are the numbers we want to address. For example, if we look at violent crime in Norfolk County and convert it to a rate per capita at 100,000, we're 12% lower than the provincial average and 34% lower than the federal average. When we do the same comparison for property crime, we're 4% below the provincial average and 31% below the federal. Just because our crime rates do not cause concern at the provincial or federal levels, it doesn't mean that we remain content with the numbers, but rather we now have made an assessment with the community engagement model of an area where police enforcement needs to be directed. The question as posed by council, are police adequately servicing the Simcoe area with resources and enforcement to address the current needs? The analysis shows that we are having a significant impact on both crime in Simcoe and the surrounding county. We have an equal dispersion currently of resources dedicated to Simcoe that equates to the calls for service. I would say that balancing the decrease in crime trends currently with equitable police service delivery to the rest of the county, the current model is working quite well for resource dedication to Simcoe. The final point I want to address is the question of what the OPP is doing to address crime trends in Simcoe. I believe I've addressed the issue of crime trends and public safety not solely being the responsibility of police. I've also addressed the significant impact we have had on crime rates in Simcoe and the county. In addition, we have been very engaged with our community partners to promote the community and engagement model within your community. We sit on the community policing committees and give input to the committees. We have our mobile crisis rapid response team, which is a fantastic engagement between the police and the community for mental health and to connect people with mental health issues to the support services they need as soon as possible. In 2017, our auxiliary unit dedicated over 5,400 volunteer hours. Over 1,000 of those hours were totally dedicated to community policing events. Street crimes laid over 480 criminal and CDSA charges and executed over 30 warrants in our community, and that's just since April. In media, we've put out close to 1,200 media releases to continue conversations with our community about what our enforcement actions are and what we're doing. We've addressed a community mobilization coordinator that does presentations and awareness throughout the community in relation to identity theft, fraud, realtor safety, driving for seniors, bullying, along with a number of other topics. We currently sit as an active participant on the situation table. Just coming up this month, we've created an annual Citizens Academy so that the community can actually develop and have a greater awareness of what policing is and what we do in the community. We run robbery prevention programs. We ran an OPP positive ticketing program for the community. We sit on a number of different action tables that look at that social disorder cause within the community and try to give our input for resolutions. We've started Neighborhood Watch in St. Williams, and Boose Harbor and Port Rowan are also working towards this. We sit on several committees, Harm Reductions, Project Lifesaver, and several other committees that we're actually looking at putting a list together within our detachment to note all of them. In 2017, we conducted over 76 directed patrols specifically to community issues and public safety issues that have spurred up through the year. I believe the last two issues to address was the comments by council in relation to lack of foot patrol and lack of visibility of street crimes units. Foot patrol numbers are reported monthly and are accessible to the public. Foot patrol is completed in communities that we feel have the biggest impact on public safety, and not all communities will have foot patrol in their areas for these reasons. Street crime is a plainclothes investigative unit focused on tackling community level and drug property and property crime. They are not meant to be a frontline visible unit. In closing, one of the most important points for me to make today is in relation to our support services in Norfolk County. I've spoken a lot today about the need for community to work with police in mutual safety efforts. I cannot say enough about my experience since arriving here in Norfolk, about the existing cooperation of community support services and the relationships that have been fostered as we progress, especially in our MCERT program, situation tables, action, and anchor tables. I truly look forward to the progress in the future and thank you for welcoming us at the tables and as a community partner. In conclusion, thank you for the opportunity to address the concerns raised by Council. I believe our members have made great strides in crime prevention within Norfolk and Simcoe counties. We look forward to future conversations and involvement in strategies to address social disorder issues within our community, and I urge anyone in their community that wants to be a part of working with the police to further public safety, to please reach out to your community leaders for more information on community policing committees, neighborhood watch, and other community-led programs. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much. You've done your homework very well. Appreciate it. Mr. Oliver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And Inspector, I echo the Mayor's comments. Both Mayor Luke and I, the night those two councillors expressed those concerns, did a very paltry job of trying to support what you've just done in detail and in a much better way. So thanks for that. Would it be possible, Mr. Chairman, that the inspector's comments would be made available through Maureen to members of County Council? I, for one, would love to see them have those remarks.
Mr. Chair, I certainly made note to ask that very question. Thank you. And also, I would even suggest a deputation from the inspector to council, which would obviously go to the public. If she was willing to do so, I think would be excellent. We need to make everyone aware of the work that our detachment does in fighting crime throughout Norfolk County. However, whatever you wish to pursue, Member Oliver, is fine with me.
Well, if a deputation could be arranged as well, I think that would be a terrific idea. Not only in the context of what the OPP is doing, but in the context that we've been talking about already this morning about this greater role for the community as a whole in public safety. And I think that's a message that we might ask the inspector to include in her comments as part of a deputation. So I think that's a great idea. I'd like to see us do both if we can.
Your thoughts on coming to council to give us a summary of what you have just relayed to us, Inspector, or if you don't wish to do that, certainly could you make that report available, and Councillor Oliver and I would certainly distribute that and comment on it at council. What's your thoughts?
I would certainly be open to both. Whatever your desires are, then I can certainly do both.
Well, we'll see what the board wishes to do here. Dave?
Mr. Chair, on a very positive note, thank you, Inspector. A couple of things that the public needs to know. We have the finest electronic equipment that can be provided to the force. We have the speed spies, we have the license plate detectors, something maybe the public doesn't know. And she didn't mention, you know, there's between 2,000 and 3,000 false alarms and 911 calls, which 85% are false alarms, or 911 calls and alarm calls, but 85% are false alarms. And, you know, are you wondering what these guys are doing out there? I've been on a number of ride-alongs, and I congratulate you guys. That's about all. I won't get into a lot of rhetoric. I've seen these numbers decrease myself over the last 7 years on this board. Thank you again for that information.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Carol, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to thank you, too, for providing us with more data and helping us to understand further the numbers, the crime rates, and the overall downward trend. So thank you. Because those were the questions. When I read that in the media, those were exactly the questions that popped up in my mind, and I knew you could could give those to us. So thank you.
Again, you're welcome.
One of the comments I wish to make, if I can, is Maureen hooked me up to the OPP News portal. I assume that all members of the board are on the emails from the portal. And I am honestly amazed at how much work our detachment does and the work that they do and the amount of charges that are laid to get the drugs out of our community, to the ride programs, the number of charges for drunk driving, for disturbances, for public mischief. It goes on, and I'm really impressed with how much work is being done and the results. And of course, the education component cannot be overlooked as well in educating our students in schools and our public. So, I tell people that often complain to me, I feel very safe in our county and certainly in my time in the town of Simcoe. I feel safe. And so what we're hearing from our inspector here is crime has gone up, and we have dealt with it and are to continue to deal with it, our detachment, and we've actually seen the crime rates go down in the last 5 to 7 years, despite the fact that there are more and more challenges. So, yeah. So what's your direction on this? Jim, what's your thoughts?
Need a motion, Mr. Chairman?
I
Is that
think we
what
should
you're
have a
looking for?
motion
Okay.
here and give direction to
Then I would put forward a motion that the comments from the inspector that have been provided to the board this morning be provided to members of county council,
Thank you.
and that Inspector Anderson be requested to appear as a deputation at county council at the first opportunity.
Okay, thank you. David?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that
Thank you.
motion, and I would like to make sure that the board is informed. I would like to be at council
Thank
for
you.
that, at that time.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And if you wish to contact me, we do not meet again council till the 27th of March. So we can certainly set you up with the clerk, a time to come, and if I can be of any assistance in helping distribute that and getting it ready, certainly, I'd be delighted to do that. You've done all the work, so I'd like to help you with getting that to council if I can.
Excellent, I'll reach out to you definitely.
Okay, thank you. And again, on behalf of the board, thank you very much for all your work on this response. Very well done. Thank you. Nothing else on page 20 then. I would like to move on. Please, page 21 is the Police Services Act changes, police officer requirements. I read through this and scratched my head on some of it. And I guess probably I scratched my head because I'm not really knowledgeable. And I did want to certainly invite any questions, but under major amendments, the second bullet there, do you have any thoughts, Staff Sergeant or Inspector, on the requirements of a university degree? I asked this question because recently some of us went through the police college, and we know that it's difficult to get people to come forward to be police officers. So are you in agreement with these requirements or some of these amendments that's proposed here? Or what's your thoughts, particularly on the education component? Because I know that the time spent at the Elmer Police College is a pretty... you just have to find time to breathe with the amount of work you cover. I think it's 12 weeks, I believe, is what it is. Do you wish to comment on that, any part of this, really?
I really don't know what the background is on the decision in relation to this. I know under the Police Services Act that it's part of the priorities. It's in the first paragraph of Police Services Act that the police should be a representation of the communities that they serve. And I don't think that's necessarily just in age or sex or ethnic background. So I certainly have my own opinions.
Yes.
But I don't think it's representative of the OPP, and I don't know what the history is or the reasoning for the background on this, no.
Thank you. Anything from board members on this proposed legislation? Item G on our agenda is the PSB Zone 4 minutes from January 9th. I noticed as I read through these, I don't believe anyone from our board attended that one. Any comments, questions on these minutes? Okay. And last but certainly not least is on page 26 and 27 is the email from our chair, Mr. Hellier, from February the 21st to our secretary. Any discussion on this topic of out-of-town non-locals and the concerns there? I think we've kind of covered this with inspector's response to council's concerns. Maureen, before I finish up with correspondence, what did I have here? Here we are. I was provided, you provided me with the two questions and an email from Mr. Hellier. Is this the time I should address his emails? I think it is.
Yes, sure,
I
yes.
made a note. Did members of the committee get this? They did?
Yes.
Okay. And just along this line, email last week from our chair with two questions. Number one, police presence. Peter talked about the complaints regarding a lack of police presence and comments on the T with the OPP. So I think that the inspector has certainly given us an excellent response to that question. The second question that he emails about is calling the OPP using star OPP. It wasn't answered to my satisfaction. I'd like to know what the current state of technology is to people who call in using star OPP. Will the police have a GPS coordinate for that person irrespective of whether they have locate on in their phone and to what degree of accuracy? Does anybody wish to comment on these questions? Inspector, any thoughts?
Yeah, Star OPP, my understanding, and I can certainly look into this and get some technology answers in relation to this question, but Star OPP is an automatic link to the communications center, so it identifies what area you're in and connects you directly to the communications center in relation to that area. So it would be similar to if anybody called the OPP or our communications center for a response. So I don't know what the specific situation was this was, or what the call was placed in relation to. And I really don't know about the GPS coordinates and the technology that communications has to be able to track that. I can certainly look into it and find it, but like I say, the fact that we can direct it to a specific communications center, I would think there's some type of geography that would direct the call to the appropriate channel, but I can certainly look into that and get some more information back.
Is the board okay with that response? It'll be looked into. I think it's a good idea. Carol?
Mr. Chair, I had a question. Is that for non-emergent calls?
Sorry, I left my mic on there. It is, yeah, you can also use it for non-emergent calls. Anything that's not 911 and has a nature, it was started with the OPP, Toronto Police started it, and then OPP jumped on board. It was meant for, I think it was initiated more for impaired drivers, something that was quick and easy for people to connect with, and it would get you to the appropriate communication center regardless of what area you're in Toronto. So, but I will follow up on that.
Anything else? That's all I have for correspondence. Could I get a motion to receive these 8 items of correspondence, please? David? Carol seconded. Discussion? Those in favor? Okay, thank you very much. That's carried. We'll go on to our reports now, and I am on page 28 of our agenda, and Staff Sergeant Varga, if you would like to take us
Chair,
through
if I
this.
could just step in here before we get to
Yes.
the reports. I have 2 checks to present to the board from Police Auctions Canada from our property items. One is for $8.38, and the other is for $1,106.85.
We normally have a motion to receive those? Do we get a motion? I believe we do, because it's money, for the record. I do need a mover. Carol, I do need a seconder. I do have a seconder. I'll ask if there's any discussion. I'll ask those in favor. Okay, we're good. I am trying to stay in Chairman Hellier's good books here, to do things properly, so you get nothing by him, that's for sure. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Varga. Inspector, report, please.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to start off with just some updates. So last month, we had a vacancy with our liaison for the Port Dover Community Policing Committee. Jay Eberly has been assigned as the police liaison for that community in Port Dover. February 22nd, we've spoken about it already, but we started our tea with the OPP. This is similar to coffee with the cop. The only thing is with us, we all drink tea, and we aren't coffee drinkers, so we decided to go with tea with the OPP. We started this community engagement initiative, like I say, on February 22nd, and we were in Port Rowan. It's basically, like Mr. Oliver was saying, is trying to get into the roots of community and stir conversation between police and the community about their concerns that they have. Very well received. It was Uncle's Coffee Shop that we were at in Port Rowan. Very well turned out. Some really good conversations, and a thank you to the community for taking part of that and coming out and speaking to us as well. There will be future dates announced. We want to do a number of different locations within Norfolk County itself. So Ed Sanchuk's working on that and doing all the development for us, and then we show up on the dates that Ed tells us to.
Just jump right in, Jim, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mention to the inspector, it was nice last night to have a positive comment from Councillor Height, and that was in respect of the tea with the OPP event. He spoke highly of it. Must have been there at one point, I guess, himself. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you.
Upcoming things that we have in March, we have our first provincial traffic campaign coming up, the Distracted Driving Campaign. That'll be over the March break and running from March 12th to 18th. And that's obviously on the heels of a lot of conversation about some new distracted driving laws that the province is looking at in his past royal assent, that will be looking at much stiffer penalties and driver's license suspension post-convictions, cumulative driver's license suspension post-conviction. So as we all know, in Norfolk County, for the first time in 2017, distracted driving actually is the #1 cause for our collisions, and has actually outdone our animal-involved collisions that are normally #1. March 4th, an excellent initiative as well. We have our annual sledge hockey game between South Coast Special Needs kids and our Norfolk Auxiliary program. Anyone who's interested, it's March 4th, 2 p.m. And to come out, I don't have the location on here. I can get that. It's Waterford Arena. So admission is free as long as you bring a non-perishable food item for donation to the local food bank. So that's being run by our Norfolk Auxiliary, and I'll be there as well during that event. We have an upcoming action table meeting this month in March, and we also start on the 22nd of March is our Norfolk Citizens Police Academy that we start. Some tributes, just to address. We had a letter go out thanking a member of the public. We had an arrest on Highway 24 in relation to some controlled drugs and substances charges that were laid. There was a scuffle between our officer and a member of the public stopped to assist, so we ensured that we sent an appropriate documentation out to the member of the public and to recognize that person in front of the board as well, I'd like to do. We received a letter of appreciation from CAS in relation to an officer and our MCERT program for assisting them with an investigation they had ongoing, which was great to hear their feedback. PC Eberly also received a Medal of Bravery and Life-Saving just last week in Toronto. The incident took place, my understanding is, while he was on vacation and involved the rescue of a couple of people that were having trouble in the water. So he received that medal last week. We have a number of police service medals that we've just put in for. Those would be exemplary police service medals for 20, 25, and 30 years policing. And we're also looking for some type of commendation for, we have a civilian guard that's been with us as well for over 20 years that we're looking for some commendations for that as well. We have an auxiliary constable, Constable Wazlowski, who will be receiving at the next regional awards ceremony an award for life-saving in relation to CPR efforts that were given to one of our community members during a call for service when she was out riding with police. And I will move into the actual report and the statistics. The first of note in here are overtime. So the last time that we met, we didn't have our year-end numbers for 2017, which are now contained in here. So in 2017, we had $339,077.50 spent in relation to overtime. And this was 94.23% of the allotted contract overtime amounts. This was 3% down from the year previous in 2016. So far in January, we spent 4.58% of overtime allotment, which equates to $16,787.38 for 2018. For the Crime Stoppers report, in January, we received 40 anonymous tips so far this year. And of course, that does not include update calls and admin calls as well. So far with Crime Stoppers, since inception, we've had over 2,000 arrests, over $42,000 in narcotics seized, over $5,000 in property, and over 6,000 charges. In relation to some updates and notifications from Crime Stoppers, student bursary applications have been provided to all secondary schools in Norfolk and Haldimand counties. The coordinator, Amy Bernardo, and Chair Neil Unwin attended high schools in Norfolk County and met with vice principals to discuss Crime Stoppers programs in the schools. Hagersville High School also has a Crime Stoppers breakfast planned for April 20th at 7 a.m. There's been several fundraising efforts. In January, Crime Stoppers held a fundraiser at Boston Pizza on January 18th. Members of both our admin staff and our detachment were there. It was a great event and was a great success, raising over $750 for the Crime Stoppers program. It looks like Crime Stoppers has a shredding day, which is connected to their identity theft projects and things like that, in relation to protecting your identity, that's going to be held in Simcoe on Saturday, May 12th from 9 a.m. to noon, and in Caledonia, Saturday, June 9th from 9 a.m. to noon. The Crime Stoppers Spring Gala will be held on Thursday, May 3rd at the Jarvis Community Center, and they're also starting to advertise their annual golf tournament that will be held on August 16th at Monthill Golf and Country Club. To move to the building summary on page 34. In January, we're looking at a total of 928 total calls for service, which is down from 1,080 in 2017. Year-to-date weighted hours for 2018 is 3,772.5, which is down from 4,567.6 from the year previous in 2017. I'll move on to the actual enforcement statistics. So assault, we expected, these are all based on 5-year trends, we expected 17 events in January. We reported 18, and we were within the projected range. Domestic disturbances, again, the 5-year trend, we expected 40 events, and actually reported 31, which was below the projected range for January for domestic disturbances. When we look at property crime, we expected 20 events and reported 16 actual events, but we were still within the projected range for January in relation to break and enters. Frauds, we had expected 13 events and actually reported 9, but we were still within the projected range for January. In relation to mischiefs, we expected 19 events and 18 were actually reported. Again, we fell within the projected range. Theft from motor vehicles, we expected 12 events. 16 were actually reported, and this was within our projected range as well from theft from motor vehicles. Theft of vehicles, we expected 6 events, 5 were actually reported, again within the projected range. Theft under, we expected 37 events, and 47 actual events were investigated. Theft under events reported above projected range for January. The theft under events consisted of 23 theft unders non-specific, 16 theft from motor vehicles, under 5,000 events, and 9 shoplifting events. In relation to illicit drugs, we were expecting 10 events for January and actually reported 2 events. Drug events reported below the projected range for January. In regards to drug investigations, the Halldom and Norfolk Street Crime Unit made 2 arrests, laid 6 Controlled Drugs and Substance Act charges, 2 criminal code charges. The total value of drugs seized approximately $4,500 and approximately $3,500 worth of cash also. Sorry. Moving on to traffic and collisions. All collision types for January reported within the projected range at 106. All collision types did see an increase of 30 from last year, which equates to just shy of a 40% increase. January did experience several days with significant snowfall. As a result, 27 of the 106 collisions had snow listed as the environmental condition. Of the 27 collisions, 22 were property damage, 5 were non-fatal injury. It was also noted that 17 of the 27 collisions were single motor vehicle collisions. Property damage collisions for January reported within the projected range at 91. We did see an increase of 21, which equated to 30% from January last year. A year-to-date increase of 30% was observed from the same time frame last year, which I had just said. Non-fatal collisions for January reported within the projected range again at 15. We did see an increase of 10, which equated to a 200% increase from January last year. Non-fatal injury collisions totaled, just one second, 15. In reviewing collisions, this is the non-fatal collisions I'm speaking of. In reviewing these collisions, they ranked as follow. 4 were for speed too fast, which would be in relation to the snow and the poor weather conditions, people driving too fast. Inattentive, there was 3. Following too closely, 2. Loss of control, 1. We had 1 ability impaired alcohol, one with an improper lane change, one failed to yield right away, one was a medical issue with the driver, and we had one that was an other. Fatal collisions for January were 0, and were within the projected range. And we did see a decrease of 1, which equated to 100% from last year. And there were, like I said, there was no fatal collisions reported for January, despite the poor weather conditions. Impaired driving, we expected 5 events, and actually had 5 actual events that were investigated, and were within the projected range. Mental Health Act, we expected 39 events based on a 5-year trend, and 36 actual events were reported. During the month of January, members were involved in 36 Mental Health Act related occurrences, dedicated 251 and a half hours to their investigations, and the average year-to-date time for Mental Health Act calls for service is 7 hours. And Mental Health Act events in Norfolk County reported within the projected range. To report on focus patrols, we still have our cottage watch that's open for Norfolk County. That will be running until the 1st of May. The focus has been generated in response to break and enter events along with thefts from cottages during the off-season. As of 31st of January, 14 officers have dedicated close to 70 hours to this focus patrol, and in the same time frame, there have been 4 reported break and enter events in the area during the focus patrol. We currently have the same 2 traffic focus patrols on the go that we've spoken about before at board meetings, one of which is the stretch of Highway 3 between Simcoe and Delhi, the other on Highway 24 from Brant County down to Simcoe. In relation to Highway 3, these have been open since the 1st of April, so the results that I have are cumulative. They aren't just for January itself. And these focus patrols are the regional ones I spoke of. They will be running, this will be the last quarter they will be running, which will total a year of focus patrol, and then they'll be reassessed by region, whether they will be included in the regional traffic models as well. As of the 31st of January, 39 officers have dedicated 275 hours to enforcement on Highway 3. As a result, we've laid 81 charges, 19 warnings. The majority of these, 55 of the 81, are speeding, and we have the other traffic-related offenses, other Highway Traffic Act, insurance, driver's license issues, lane changes, expired validation. We had a tobacco-related event that we investigated, impaired racing or stunt driving, and Liquor License Act infractions as well. In relation to Highway 24, as of the 31st of January, we've had 38 officers dedicated over 500 hours now to the enforcement on Highway 24. As a result, there's been over 315 charges, or there's been a total of 315 charges laid and 20 warnings. Charges break down again with 256 of those being speeding, and then we have the same breakdown that we have on Highway 3 in relation to traffic charges. But we have had 3 impaired driving, 6 controlled drugs and substances act charges laid, 3 criminal code charges, commercial motor vehicle charges, Liquor License Act charges, and stunt driving charges as well along that stretch. There haven't been any speed spy studies due to the weather that we've had. And I believe, unless I'm missing something, Joe, I think that concludes the report unless there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Inspector. Appreciate that. Any comments, questions on any of what we've just went over? Okay. You know, a motion to receive this? Moved by moved by Member Oliver, seconder. Carol, any discussion? Receive this report. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, and thanks again, Inspector, for that work. Any other business to bring before this board this morning? Hearing none, next is the question period. I see Mr. Robinson is in attendance this morning. Jacob, anything you wish to ask at this time? You're okay? Thank you very much for being here. Just before we go to closed session, I think we've covered everything. Maureen, I want to say thank you to you for your work, and especially some of the information you've given me on this morning's meeting. I appreciate that very much. Motion to go in closed session? Do you need a motion? Yes, always. David, moved. Thank you. Member Jim, seconded. Those in favor? Okay, we'll have a stretch and then we'll go into closed session. Thank you.